I don't really have a real answer of why this project exists. Ultimately, sure, he's dead, but not to me. It's just like anybody I meet, and if they see anything, even an ounce of a decent human being in me, I'm like, man, you should meet my brother Jordan. So I just wish you could have met him, but you can't, so I made this documentary. It's not good enough, but it's all I got. When he died, I didn't know much of anything, but I knew, I was like, I'm gonna tell the story somehow.
Every time I remember seeing Jordan, I remember seeing Justin.
I would say if you knew one of them, you probably knew both of them.
There were other people there too, but it was always the two of you.
It was almost like you guys could understand each other without talking.
I think you were as close as any two brothers probably that ever lived, just about.
Justin, man, we do everything together. We're just like better best friends. I love you so much.
Like Justin was a person that led Jordan in a lot of ways, but Jordan also had this just great example of how to be a man and how to do it right. And it was a great balance, not only for Justin, but for all of us.
If I had to describe Jordan to somebody that didn't know him, I would probably say
A gentleman and a light.
Say hi.
Whoa! Last thing you do is snap now. Whoa!
Yeah! Ready, Jordan? Go. Now, you're the only one.
Hey, Jordan, smile. See it, snap a tooth.
He had one of those kind of personalities that, like, he wasn't going to say much when he was in a room, but you always got comfort knowing that he was in the room.
Is this Merry Christmas Morning, 1996? Wonder what that is.
A bike.
You think so?
Yeah.
Is it really?
Is this gonna be like a theme of like every girl you interview about them being in love with Jordan? Jordan is the kind of guy, you hope to raise your son that way. The kind of guy you hope your daughter marries.
it sounds so cliche to say all these things, but it's like most true when I'm speaking about Jordan.
After he passed away, like nobody had to lie about who he was.
He was a shooter, first of all. He'd catch the ball and shoot. And then he really didn't have any moves after that.
Anybody that got to know Jordan, they were blessed to know Jordan.
He really lived life the way it should be lived.
Death is really weird for a lot of people because people say we'll never forget or, they'll never be forgotten. But people forget. When you really love someone deeply, I don't think you forget. And I think if you love somebody, you talk about them. This documentary is just me talking about them. I don't know, this documentary is pretty simple, I guess. I love Jordan and Jordan loved me. I think that's pretty good.
My parents met in 1974 at Southwestern Baptist Theological Seminary in Fort Worth, Texas.
It's a place where people usually go to become a missionary or a pastor like my dad or like my mom to find a spouse. They were married on June 28, 1975. My dad was 33 and my mom was 24. And I think this is my dad trying to serenade my mom on the honeymoon, so let's skip ahead. Jeffrey Matthew Robinson was born in Fort Worth, Texas on September 28, 1980. He led the way for us brothers into the game of basketball and as a fan of Michael Jordan. But more than anything, he loved all things weaponry. And he didn't discriminate either. As long as bullets or something sharp came out of it, he was into it. He coordinated most of our violent fun growing up. Living room football, wrestling, and boxing matches when our parents weren't home. He even created a first-person shooter game where you could be Davy Crockett fighting at the Alamo.
This is Davy Crockett defending the west wall of the Alamo against Santa Anna's march.
And he even had someone behind the camera throwing little pop-pop firecrackers on cue with the violence. After graduating high school with this serial killer photo, he went on to the West Coast to study constitutional law. He passed the bar in everything, but instead went to study theology at the Baptist College of Florida. And during his time there, he created somewhat of an underground boxing fight club made up of mostly pastors. In 2008, he followed in Mom and Dad's footsteps by graduating from Southwestern Seminary with a Master's of Divinity in Apologetics. And now, he's a pastor.
You okay? I know there's somebody in here who's real tight who's about to leave already, but just hang with us for the next hour and a half. Just kidding.
At that point, my dad got another church job in Broken Arrow, Oklahoma. And 9 months after some of this, we have second-born Joshua David Robinson, born in Tulsa, Oklahoma on January 30th, 1984. He followed in Jeff's footsteps in his love for Michael Jordan and for basketball. He was a competitive kid, the type of kid who couldn't hide how he felt, whether it was anger, joy, or the things only puberty can do. He'll probably be mad at me for showing some of these clips.
Turn it off. Turn it off.
My mom called him the social chairman because he always wanted to be involved in the action. He ended up playing one season of both basketball and baseball at Toccoa Falls College in 2004. But his first love was surfing. In December 2006, he graduated from the Baptist College of Florida with a degree in Christian education. And he worked as a youth pastor for a while, but now he too is a pastor.
Let that sink in for a minute.
Then, on August 24th, 1987, the man of the hour, Jordan Paul Robinson, was born in Tulsa, Oklahoma, instantly making the world a better place. After that, my dad moved the family to Charlotte, North Carolina for a new church job. For the next 3 years, it was Jeff, Josh, and Jordan, and they enjoyed what they could while they had the chance because it wasn't long until I came into the picture. And there I am, the run of the litter, born in Pineville, North Carolina on August 30th, 1990, to a 39-year-old mom and a 47-year-old dad. Outside of apple juice, Jordan was never really defensive of much of anything, but he was of me.
Dad, that's my brother.
This is your brother.
He kept telling Jeff and Josh that I was his baby.
My baby. It's my baby.
And from that moment on, outside of the bathroom, we were never really apart. We were a match made in heaven. Polar opposites in a lot of ways, but that evened us out into quite the little duo. He had grace, and I didn't.
Oh, vicious. Oh.
He was the good cop, and I was definitely not the good cop. Any other dude in his place probably would have killed me, or vice versa. Probably vice versa. I think just the fact that Jordan went 20 years without putting me in the hospital is worth a documentary. As I filled out the last spot on our family roster, one thing was true. I was the black sheep of the bunch. I raised a lot of hell for a pastor's kid.
Bad kid.
Through VHS tapes of the MJ Bulls dynasty, I fell in love with the game of basketball. My life plan was to go play college basketball for the North Carolina Tar Heels and then go be a Navy SEAL. But let's pause and rewind back to the magical, pivotal moment in my origin story, when I realized what a camera did.
Are we going to watch ourselves jumping?
Yes.
Whoa. There's going to be a movie of us?
My life was forever changed. I started making videos in middle school with our VHS camera and became Jordan's communist director. After that, I started making short films in college and got my foot in the door of the film industry as a camera assistant, with dreams of being a writer-director.
Come on! Stop! Stop! Stop!
But there came a point in my filmmaking where I couldn't make anything else until I made this documentary. So here we are, a documentary about a brother, by a brother. Now, at this point of the story, my dad took a new church job in Luling, Louisiana.
Hymn number 547. Let's stand together this morning.
I mean, we had a good old Southern Baptist, small town, look after, know everything church.
You can count the big numbers, can't you?
Yeah, I can count the 13 or 12.
We were very homeschooled, if you already couldn't tell by our haircuts. You can always spot a homeschool kid when their sideburns are cut all the way above the ear. I think my mom wanted to save money and shield off the world with our spiritual warfare helmets. My dad used to always say, your hair should draw to your countenance. Outside of haircuts, there were a few other things that were out of our control. We weren't allowed to go to the movie theater, and the films we were allowed to watch at home had to be G-rated. To my mom, PG was practically rated R, so we saw the films Gordy and Babe way too many times. This clip shows what it looks like for a homeschooler to interact with the outside world. I'm kidding, Mom. This clip here is what it looks like for Jordan to interact with the world. Jordan was a peaceful cat. He was like Winnie the Pooh with a bowl of honey. He did stare at things a lot, sometimes at girls, and sometimes at imaginary vanilla wafers in the midst of peril. Without any good movies to watch, our entertainment had to be pretty creative. Jordan always thought it was hilarious when Jeff would put me on his shoulders and stuff my big head full of crackers. The only outside world we knew was when we visited my grandmother, my mom's mom, in Pensacola, Florida, or when we go to Gatlinburg, Tennessee on vacation, where this kid learned to never stop in front of me. In this clip, Jordan was annoyed with me because a few minutes prior, I wouldn't let him pass me in the Daytona 500. My mom always liked to end the trip with one of those Western family portraits.
Today in the town of David, a Savior has been born to you.
Since we were pastors' kids, we were automatically involved for every god-awful church musical growing up. And this tune couldn't have sung it clearer. There's only a few unscarring clips in this musical madness, such as this one, where Jordan wins over the audience with his cuteness.
Tell him to buzz off. Tell him to leave. Tell him we're stressed out. Give them a heave.
Or this one, where his eyes couldn't quite compute how pretty this girl was. Or this one, where he almost sang too early but played it off with a cough.
Jordan was like my first best friend growing up. We both liked the Bulls. You know, he had his love for Michael Jordan, and I liked Tony Kukoc.
Hey, Shaun, how old are you?
8.5.
You're at that age where you're starting to realize certain things. You know, I remember the Olympics. Me and him had a crush on Dominic Musciano. We were so scared for anybody to hear it. You know, we didn't want anybody to know because you were embarrassed.
I picked this all out myself, Jordan. You did? You like it? Yeah.
Since Jordan's birthday was on August 24th and mine was on the 30th, even though we were 3 years apart, we always celebrated our birthdays together. We liked to party at Discovery Zone or Funworks, which was pretty much heaven for us. But sometimes we had to party on a budget, and that's where my mom would come up with cheap games to keep us boys grateful and occupied.
I remember one game of passing something around. Your mom was playing the recorder for whoever stopped, who got the present, and I tried to hold on to it long, and Jordan just ripped it out of my hands and just punched me and just no, we don't do that. And I was like, all right, dude, whatever.
My mom even did this for Jeff and Josh way back in the 80s when my dad would dress up like a character straight out of a Wes Anderson movie. I don't really know how it started, but Jordan went through this mini stuntman phase from ages 8 to 11 where he really just didn't care about pain. Although most of Jordan's falls weren't on purpose, dating all the way back to his diaper days onward. Of all the falls he took, this is the only clip of him crying. But he got tackled playing Duck Duck Goose, so that's fair. Nobody wants to be on the pot.
Mom, I'm ready.
Outside of a high tolerance for pain, A couple other aspects of Jordan was that he'd stutter if he got too stoked about something.
Hey, that was the same what I got. I just said,
there you go.
Oh, boy!
And he'd stick out his tongue when he played video games, and that actually went on his entire life, and it was always a huge source of joy for me and my camera.
Hey, what's inside here, guys? I don't know.
Our neighborhood was pretty much like the movie The Sandlot. All the kids came together to play.
There was always a sport to play.
It was always about hoops. We played a lot of street hockey, we played baseball. We were always outside running around.
We even had a community pool, and that gave birth to many dreams about our future Wendy Peppercorn. Here's proof of my first ever romantic relationship. Sadly, I didn't even get her name.
One thing I really loved about visiting the Robinsons' house, Miss Jennifer was always baking some bread. She had this bread machine, the house always smelled good, and me, being a big kid, I like to eat. The basketball was always intense in the driveway. I wasn't really that good at basketball, so I would just hang with Miss J and eat the bread she made.
They were all male, just all American, party boys trying to out-wrestle, out-punch, out-shoot, out-play, outrun each other.
I don't know how we got it past Mom, because she was not a fan of violence at all, but we were able to get a set of boxing gloves from a garage sale. You know, Justin, when he was young, we would teach him how to punch us in the face. Like, he was just a little toddler kid. Okay, right here, get your fists like this and hit me in the face. And we would, like, guide his hand and, you know, get him to work his core so he could throw a good hook.
For those of you that know Justin wanted blood. He wanted to just take my head off because I was the brother that kind of gave him a hard time.
Come on, Weenie.
Justin was throwing 1, 2, 3s from the time he was just a runt. Jordan, it never really clicked. I think Jordan, when he put on boxing gloves, we called him Clubber, and he would open his mouth. I don't think he's ever thrown a straight punch in his life. This is our street. That's it. That's our house.
Hi, Justin.
I'm really grateful for basketball and the culture that comes with it. It was my gateway into the unsheltered world. It taught me a lot about myself, about humanity, about life. Around 1998 or so, my dad took a new job in the middle of nowhere, Bonham, Texas. We lived in Bonham for about a year, and after Y2K didn't happen, we were on to a new church, this time in Palm Bay, Florida. Our new neighbors across the street had 2 kids, Daniel and Jeff. I became friends with Daniel through common ground and our love for Tar Heel basketball. We only hit heads once, and that was on accident. Sorry, dude. Jordan became friends with Jeff, who was a skateboarder. So Jordan ended up trading a basketball for a skateboard. Up to that point, he liked basketball, but he didn't love it. And he was never super vocal about what he liked or much of anything, really. So you really had to listen to his actions. And though it took some trash talk, I could get Jordan away from his board long enough to get a game of one-on-one.
Allen Iverson.
Justin loved the game, and Jordan knew Justin loved the game because you wanted to play college basketball. You wanted to play at North Carolina, and he was going to do what he needed to do to help you fulfill that dream.
As a freshman, Jordan picked up the basketball again. That team didn't have a whole lot of depth. So much so, they had me, a 6th grader, dress out on varsity.
You handled it a lot better than I thought you would. You handled your own, man, like you did good.
It was a lot harder for Jordan to hold his own out there. Without his skateboard, he was a fish out of water.
I mean, he came from a basketball family, and he didn't play basketball. And he was skateboarding, man, when we found him. And basketball was an afterthought. And when he started, it was a disaster.
Don't go away from the ball. Go to the ball. He wasn't clumsy. I don't know what size shoe he had or how big his hands were, but he was just that kind of guy. He was graceful, but yet he was clumsy at the same time, if that makes any sense. Go to the ball, George. Go to the ball.
But then he decided, for whatever reason, that he wanted to play. He was like, I want to be able to do this. And he didn't necessarily have the skills and know-how to, but he knew he needed to be able to do this. And I saw something in him that I didn't see in a lot of the other kids. A lot of the kids get in there and start playing pig or whatever like that. No, man, he'd be out there getting another 20, 50, 100 shots, you know, curling off a high screen, getting the feet right and squaring up. And he was just so faithful about doing these little things and coming to practice all the time and getting better.
And it showed. I mean, from his quick release to such a smooth shot, you can tell that this kid, hey, he didn't just go shoot 5 times this week. He's probably got 1,000 shots in already this week. Like, that's hours of work.
They're far and few between that come with that kind of work ethic that was put in by God at a very young age and then used in all areas of his life. And basketball just received his innate qualities of faithfulness, of hard work, of commitment.
There are certain kids that you coach and you're sort of hoping, you know, that they bring it this day or that day or an important game or that. With Jordan, I never had to think about that.
You almost have like an advantage being brothers because you grew up playing all the time together.
They were like the dynamic duo. It was like one didn't come without the other.
Justin would be out there talking trash, destroying kids' self-esteem.
And you took basketball to more than just a physical sport and a talent, because there's a mental side of it too, and you know how to mess with people's mental side.
Justin, he was mouthy all the time, smack. Everybody knew who he was when he walked into the gym. And nobody even sometimes knew who Jordan was. I mean, he would just kind of walk in and take care of business and then walk back out.
We were like, not the same, but on the same wavelength. Symphony of a relationship.
And I think Justin really played that key role as they played together and being that one that constantly spoke to him and constantly pushed him. And it was really just an awesome thing to watch. They're distinct, different styles of play, with Justin being just so creative and making things happen. And Jordan's just, you know, one throwing the dagger out there every time.
He was very, very unique in so much that his life was outside the game was exactly the same as it was on the court.
Since me and Jordan weren't allowed to date or go to the movies, we started to make good use of our off-season by making videos with my mom's VHS camera. We began making videos titled The Fruits. We'd go to Walmart the day after Halloween to buy discounted wigs and costumes with money we made cutting grass in the summer.
The sun is blocked by 2 evil men.
The two of you together, you and Jordan together, that was a mess. It was a fun mess.
Justin and Jordan brought costumes everywhere they went.
You know, going to a basketball tournament and having players bring a suitcase full of props. Jordan just did not care what anybody thought. I mean, he just didn't care.
Which was a lot of fun to see, especially in their coaches.
Smile for the camera. Smile. Coach, say hello.
I probably needed that as a coach. I mean, I was probably way too serious.
Let's see what happens. Hey, Coach. How you going?
The two of them together just made mayhem that everybody wanted to be a part of.
And once we got Coach away from all the professional adults, he joined us in the Fruits.
This is what happens when you remember all the skills that I've taught you. This is what you can become.
Me, Jordan, and Coach always had the awkward homeschool baller down to a science.
Justin was like the producer Nazi.
Go here, sit here, redo that.
He's the smallest one out there. He's telling us what to do. The crazy thing is we did it.
You idiot.
And it's funny, when I think about Jordan, he's very opposite in a lot of ways. Jordan also had this side where, like, if Justin would lead him to do something, he would do it. So Justin created all the crazy things to do, and then Jordan was the one most likely doing it.
And now, the revenge of Jordan.
Like I said earlier about Jordan not being super vocal about what he wanted to do, now he wanted to play college basketball. And since nobody was knocking on his door with a scholarship, he found a mom-approved Christian university in South Carolina.
We called and they said they were having a tryout. They already had most of the team, but they were doing walk-on tryouts.
We knew in that fall that he was going to make a difference. We didn't know if it was going to be as the all-time career scorer in North Greenville history, or if it was just going to be through his work ethic, through his attitude, and honestly, either was going to be fine with us. And that's what made us realize that we needed Jordan Robinson.
I don't know what his expectations were when he started playing at North Greenville, but we knew with the team that we had that he wasn't going to play a ton his freshman year. And yet he comes in and he is in better shape than every single person that we have, is working harder than every single person that we have. And it was fun to watch.
Like he was that kid you hated to play against, but you loved to have him on your team because you didn't have to play against him.
It's not like we took it easy on him. He got beat up every day. Tough as nails, never complained, not once. And that was one of the things I admired about him. Because, you know, he would show up every day and work his tail off, and knowing he wasn't gonna play.
Jordan was that guy that dove after every loose ball.
You know, even if it's practice, you know, where a lot of guys might pull up, Jordan would say, I'll jump out of bounds to get this. That in itself, you know, makes a team better. You're kind of always like looking over your shoulder like, where's Jordan? You know?
That went a long way, because if your top three guys love the heck out of your 15th guy, then your locker room's going to be in a good place. I mean, just understanding that, because how can you not be committed to him when you watch how committed he is to you?
Me and my parents would go visit Jordan often, and on one of those visits, my dad interviewed for a new church job in the Greenville area.
It was a sad night. I really had a great time coaching you. It was one of the things that's underrated in coaching. There's a lot of kids I've coached, they're not fun to coach. They're good players, good kids. I really had a good time coaching you, so that was a disappointing night.
He held it together that whole time. And when you left, he was in tears in the kitchen.
The day they drove up to South Carolina for their move, Justin played in his first game with us that night.
And since me and Jordan were under the same roof again, I had to remind him what kind of brother I was.
I wasn't trying to do that. Dude, what the heck? Dude, I missed it twice. How is that possible?
After our first season in South Carolina ended, Florida was on our mind. But for Jordan, it was a girl, Rachel. Now, she was still in school back at Covenant, but they had developed a relationship before he left and throughout his freshman year. So, Rachel invited Jordan to the junior-senior. And like a good third wheel, I was gonna come too. The day before, or it was the day of, we went to a matinee showing of the movie Disturbia. It was one of those movies where it was a perfect opportunity to hold her hand, because it was a little suspenseful. And I remember noticing, or kind of feeling the tension of her wanting him to hold her hand and Jordan wanting to hold her hand, but neither of them doing anything about it.
I mean, it was so funny because I knew what he wanted to do. He wanted to hold my hand.
It was like the third act, and I remember just telling Jordan, hold her hand. And just a small window into Jordan's backstory, he had never kissed a girl.
But that meant the little things that Jordan did meant like the world.
After the event was over, Rachel later shared this story of Jordan's boldness, and that's without any screen direction from me.
It was raining outside. He's looking at me and he's like, okay, you have two options. He's like, I can either go get the car for you or I can pick you up and carry you to the car. And at first I was like, no, it's okay. But he's like, no, come on. And so he picked me up and carried me out to the car, and I was laughing the whole entire time. He actually ended up taking me to the wrong car. And so we were both just laughing, and so he just set me down and we walked the rest of the way to the car because he was pretty tired, I think.
After a few days home, we went back to Greenville.
Scene 3, Actor 1. Commence.
Jordan spent the rest of that summer getting better and getting a lot stronger. He always had a very high tolerance for pain, and trust me, I would know. His 5 out of 10 pain level would be a 15 out of 10 for the average Joe. And even when he was in pain, he would rarely ever complain about it.
When Jordan was in high school, he had a knot on his shin. And we asked our family doctor and then a doctor friend what they thought. And they said, well, it's probably just an injury maybe from the basketball or pull muscle or something like that. You could check it out, but it's probably just something like that. So we didn't think much about it.
You can sort of see the lump on his leg here. I remember watching him at one practice earlier in the year, and I could tell he was in pain.
We'd fall down and grab it and get right back up. Other than that, I mean, like I said, he didn't complain. Ever. I mean, I was hurt all the time. I was in and out of the training room. He was never in there.
And I could tell his pain was different, but like most athletes, he just kept playing through it. Although he'd sometimes keep it wrapped in case it got bumped. It would often flare up and get kind of red or feverish looking.
After Jordan's first year at college, playing basketball and getting hit and falling and everything, he said, this thing hurts. I'm ready to get it off.
A local sports-related doctor told us that it was probably a herniated disc or just some fluid built up. So he said, we'll do a simple surgery to drain it. I remember that doctor praying in front of my parents, which was like telling him he's on the same team as he assured them that this is just a run-of-the-mill problem. What they discovered in his leg was the farthest thing from run-of-the-mill.
When I took Jordan for his first follow-up after the surgery to make sure his stitches were all healing up and everything from that, the doctor walks in and he says, we're going to recommend that you go see an oncologist. And I said to myself, an oncologist? That's a cancer doctor.
I just remember that day. It was so weird because you never think about it until it happens to somebody that's close to you or that you care about.
What do you do? What do you think? What do you say?
It didn't seem real, because, Jordan being who he was, nicest person I knew.
It felt so surreal that it would happen to Jordan, of all people.
He was really one of those people, like, why Jordan? He's such an amazing man. Like, why Jordan?
So there you have it. The most merciful and kind-hearted dude I know has cancer.
The epithelioid type make up less than 1% of the sarcoma, so it is a very rare tumor.
Since this type of cancer was so incredibly rare, they reached out to Harvard for a second opinion, who replied, I'm sorry to say that I can do no better than to label this as an unclassified epithelioid malignant neoplasm. Basically what had happened was that drain surgery not only discovered those suspicious cells, it drained those cells into his ankle. He was then scheduled for surgery on August 7th, and that was referred to as a considerable debulking procedure and/or radical resection. After that surgery, his ankle was still positive for persistent sarcoma. The doctor then recommended further resection, but also explained to my parents that Jordan might ultimately require a below-knee amputation in order to control the tumor. They understood this and wished to proceed with further resection. And even after both surgeries, they couldn't remove the entirety of the sarcoma. The trauma from those procedures on Jordan's leg was catastrophic. Per the doctor's notes, this dissection did leave peroneal tendons as well as distal fibula. Also, the very lateral edge of the Achilles tendon was exposed. The wound was found to be 25 centimeters by 13 centimeters in size. They had to take a skin graft from his thigh to try and cover his now open leg, and they followed that up with a wound vac. And for those who don't know what a wound vac is, here's Wikipedia's definition. The therapy involves the controlled application of subatmospheric pressure to the local wound environment using a sealed wound dressing connected to a vacuum pump. It promotes wound healing by applying a vacuum through a special sealed dressing. The continued vacuum draws out fluid from the wound and increases blood flow to the area. A nurse would often have to come by the house to check on the wound vac and clean and rebandage his leg, which would cause a quiet and patient kid like Jordan to, at times, scream.
Jordan would go into the bathroom in the evenings and he just would be in there cleaning it. I mean, just like if somebody came and just gutted your lower leg, and other than the pain bother him, he just did it.
You tell Jordan to go run a mile in 5.5 minutes, and he's like, well, I'm going to work at that until I can do that. You tell him to go, stay in the gym until he makes 1,000 threes, he's going to stay in the gym until he does it. You give him cancer and tell him that he's got to try to beat it, then I don't think he knew how to think any other way.
Jordan was so positive with it, the idea of him, losing the battle to that just didn't really even enter my mind because I didn't feel like it had even really entered his.
Through it all, he started his fall classes for his sophomore year on crutches and in a wheelchair. And he obviously wasn't going to be playing basketball that season, but he was still a part of the team.
Even when he was in a wheelchair, he never wanted the attention. Never. And even then he wasn't complaining.
This is one of the last pictures of him before his luscious locks started to fall out from the chemo. And in honor of his last haircut for a while, we went for the rebellious homeschooler look. In February 2008, Jordan finished his 36th and final treatment of radiation before continuing on with more chemo. March was filled with basketball. We got to go to the ACC championship between North Carolina and Clemson, and then he came to the final tournament of my junior season in Virginia. And no matter how I played or how upset my dad got, Jordan kept us all laughing.
How can you be in so much pain and still have so much fun? People that I see that are in pain, they complain the whole time. It's always about them, It was never about Jordan. Everyone came before him, and that's just how he lived his life.
Even throughout the unrelenting cancerous process, this dude still made a cameo in our videos.
Oh, cool, hi.
I don't know where your hand's been.
The cancer was tough on him, but the fact that he was still out there filming with us and there to support Justin, obviously.
People share things, whether it's a food or a drink or time together, they would share laughter.
One night when it was 3 a.m. and he was up, not able to sleep, and Jordan's not the most blunt person in the world. That's more right my realm, but he just looked at me and goes, "You know what, dude?" I'm like, "What, man?" "Cancer is a bitch." And I was, "Dude, yeah, it is. Yeah, it is, and more. Tell me about it." That was probably the hardest we laughed through the whole entire time he had cancer, was when he said cancer is a bitch. It was the first time I heard him cuss. So I was like, ooh, Gord, wow. During this time, Josh had been living in Jacksonville, Florida. He'd gotten engaged to Cassidy on Valentine's Day 2008, and they were set to marry in June.
I remember at the wedding, it was kind of an emotional time, and I know how much it meant for Josh and Cassidy for him to be there, just as much as it meant to him.
And it was hard, for him even to be at rehearsal.
Jordan marched through the groomsmen process like he did everything else, like a champ.
I got to see his leg for the first time. That was overwhelming. And then I got to see Jordan emotional for the first time. He kind of broke down just a little bit. And I got to see some of the hurt and some of the confusion that was going on. It kind of let me into that world just a little bit. And man, I was crushed.
For me, it was a time of excitement and then brokenness. I can't do this.
And I think that was probably the first time it became real for me that Jordan was really sick. And by then, he was really sick.
After that, he started declining really fast. The cancer wasn't just taking over his entire leg, but his entire body.
Going from this guy with muscles and abs and to being so thin and face sunk in, it was almost like you saw a shell of him. And
up to that point, he had 36 treatments of radiation, 7 treatments of chemo, and 5 surgeries. And even still, he was being eaten alive. The doctor came to our house and told us and Jordan that there was nothing else he could do. Months, he said. I stood there in the doorway of Jordan's room and listened to him cry. My parents then took Jordan to Duke to see if they had any new experimental options, but sadly they said there was nothing else that could be done.
Jimmy's driving, I'm in the front seat, then Jordan's in the back seat of the car, 6'2", size 13 shoe. He is crying his little heart out back there. And he says, Mom, please help me.
And I couldn't bring myself, though, to even talk to Jordan about him dying. I should have, but I couldn't. I always held out that maybe God at the last minute was going to, so I didn't want to plant in Jordan's mind and heart that he couldn't be healed. So I just couldn't bring it up.
The pain was so bad, we had to really up the morphine. Just the morphine affects your mind. And Jordan was never a person who was afraid of much of anything, took pain very well, but then it started to cause him to have a lot of fear.
Jimmy said, I really want him to go to the hospital. And Jordan didn't really want to go to the hospital.
Just that thought of going back to the hospital terrified him. He would just, scream, please, please, don't take me back there, don't take me back there.
I couldn't really watch.
We just grabbed a sheet that he was on.
The progression be from, oh, my leg hurts, see him on crutches, then into that wheelchair, and then to that hospital bed. I mean, it never seemed real until the day we put him in the ground. Happened on a Tuesday, and a friend from our church came to the room and they asked me if I wanted to come eat downstairs, and to this day I've never eaten in a hospital. They asked me, can we get you anything? And I was like, yeah, there's this smoothie place that opened downstairs. And he came back with this purple smoothie. I don't remember what flavor. Like, Jordan wasn't eating and stuff, and I went over to his bed, and he was trying to find me with his eyes, and he said, what's up, dude? I told him, I got some smoothie for you. I put the straw in his mouth, and he drank like half of my smoothie. I was like, dude, keep drinking, man. I walked over to the left of the end of the bed and was sitting in one of those stinky, crappy hospital chairs. My dad was like reading a newspaper, and my mom was just reading something, and I'm here, and his bed's like right here, and his head's over there, and I'm just watching him. He just kind of breathed. He raised his chest real high, and he made a noise that was like, it's like a code red or something. And he breathed again, and it was harder for him. And on the second breath, I said, Mom. And then Jordan breathed one more time. He inhaled, and then he didn't exhale. My mom ran out of the hospital room, calling for a nurse, and one by one they come in and check his pulse. And the doctor came in, and Jordan's eyes were open, and he just awkwardly but politely walked over and tried to do the old, close the eyelids thing, and they didn't close. He did it again, and they didn't close. And then he looked over at me, and with my eyes, I just leave him alone. And he didn't touch him again. Then everybody left, and so I just stood with him at his bed. And it wasn't my brother anymore.
To have a son die, it's the most grief I've ever had in my life. Tears your heart out. You'd rather you die than him. It's awful.
There's a part of me that was, I don't know, worried wasn't the thing, because it's not like it matters how many people are there, but I was like is it just going to be the team and the family and the North Greenville community? Who's going to be here? And I walk in and I'm in the back row trying to figure out where I'm going to sit, because there are so many folks who are there to kind of celebrate what he meant to them. I just remember being, you know, it was, again, kind of an aha moment. I was like, well, obviously, it makes perfect sense that a kid who, you know, loves people like crazy is going to be loved back like crazy.
I don't have any footage from Jordan's funeral, but I do have this audio of Coach's eulogy.
As was said earlier, there's a lot to Jordan's life other than him being sick. He played for us at Covenant Christian down in Palm Bay, Florida. Down there are 4 things that are pretty important to us, and they were pretty important to Jordan. And that's playing for Christ, playing hard, playing smart, and playing together. If you knew Jordan, he embodied the big 4, and that's what we call that. And Jordan's final game that he played in high school, we played at Pine Castle Christian in Orlando, Florida. We lost that game. And Jordan particularly played his guts out that game. The most important thing that Jordan taught me was that the big 4, it doesn't mean anything if you just apply it to the game. What he taught me that night, in that moment, in a moment of loss, that the world saw as bad, that the newspaper would print the next day that was bad, that it was good, and that we had played hard, we had played smart, we had played together. And at the end, we were there in the middle of that court, and we were there just crying and hugging each other and giving all the glory to God. And that is what it was about. It's what it always was about for him. He lived hard. He lived smart. He lived together with his family and his teammates. And I think I speak for the 2 gentlemen behind me and a lot of his teammates that are out there. To know him is one of the greatest honors of my life. And I loved him very much. Thank you.
It was bittersweet, you know, he was in so much pain, and selfishly, I was just gonna miss him. And, but the other part of me was just, you know, happy for him. No more pain, perfectly healed, spending time with Jesus. I mean, that's just what I held to. I miss Jordan, but I thank God, you know, for what he did and the life he had here, and not one thing was wasted in what he did. And
as Jordan died, I think your connection with Coach definitely deepened.
After the funeral, Coach took me and a couple friends to a cabin in the mountains of North Carolina to get away from it all. We went to Blockbuster and rented the film No Country for Old Men, and that's all I really remember. Then he went back to Palm Bay, and I started my very blurry senior season of basketball.
My husband, who was the coach at the time, had asked Justin if there was anything we could do for him. And Justin said, I want to wear number 20, which had been Jordan's number.
It meant more to him than just a number. Like, it represented Jordan.
There was a greater drive within you to respect that. You said you were playing for Jordan that year.
I was in a weird type of autopilot. I knew what to do and how to do it, but I wasn't there. It's like when you drive somewhere, but you don't remember taking any turns or any cars. You just got there without being present. I do remember getting a lot of technicals, though.
You can't help but think about Justin and him due to how close they were, and hey, what's this gonna do to Justin? Is he just gonna be angry forever? Because maybe he's got the right to be, because that's a hardship that not many people have to experience, and the ones that do, it breaks them down.
It was a really hard time to see the change that happened in Justin. No longer the outgoing Justin that I had known for so long. Kind of became a shell. Not a lot of interaction happened for a while after that.
You were so close to Jordan. Y'all were inseparable.
It's something that doesn't go away. That's just a reflection of the significance and the impact.
I can't imagine like losing that, like almost your other half.
Your soul was ripped apart. So when you took away Jordan, it was a blow to you.
I remember many times seeing tears in his eyes as he would play.
You were shooting foul shots, you couldn't even see the goal because you was crying. And it was just, you know, as a coach, some days you just don't say nothing, just come here, or just come here, let me hold you. He'd yell in my shirt, and then he'd be done. He'd go over and sit down, and he'd be fine, and we'd go back at it. I mean, it was hard. It was hard for him. And
it just seemed like, okay, he's done with basketball. There's too many close memories to Jordan with that. That was our life growing up. Due to awful circumstances, was kind of ripped from him.
That year was just, it was up and down. I think it was a building year for all of us to have to go through that, to get to share in that impact of what Jordan meant to Justin.
When that season ended, I didn't play or watch hardly any basketball for about 6 years.
Jordan offered a lot of solidness to your life and a lot of foundation. You're this raging, awesome mountain that's just going everywhere. And Jordan was that foundation for you in a lot of areas, in a lot of ways. And when you rob anything of their foundation, things either can crumble or they can set.
Without Jordan in the world, I couldn't enjoy the game anymore. It wasn't the same, and nothing will ever be the same, but through making this documentary, I came back to the game of basketball. It wasn't until I started watching Stephen Curry who sparked me back to the game. I always thought the game left me, but that wasn't the case. I'm the one who left. My love was always there, it was just broken. Today, I keep a ball and a pair of J's in my car at all times. To me, sometimes basketball is one of the only things that makes any sense. And when I'm on a court, it's one of the few places I feel at home. And though I rarely get to play, basketball is much more to me now than it ever was before. It's therapy for me. While editing all my memories on the court and talking about Jordan to all our friends during this process, I was reminded of the joy it brought us all those years.
I love that. I love seeing how much you care about basketball again. That, for me, was a key point in okay, maybe he's doing all right now. Maybe he's doing okay. He's back to loving what us as kids and Jordan loved almost more than anything.
Jordan, as an older brother, really took care of Justin, like a way that I think every younger brother wished that their brother had.
He took the responsibility of being an older brother, to heart, and really set an example for Justin.
It was a special thing to see how much you guys loved each other.
People say you can tell a lot about someone by the way they play the game of basketball. Jordan, he played it like he lived his life. He always gave 100%, and he made everybody around him better. Jordan was the best teammate I ever had.
Justin would not be Justin Robinson if it wasn't for Jordan, and Jordan's character, and Jordan's kindness, and Jordan's consistency, and Jordan's love. All of those things about Jordan made Justin Robinson who he is. And I love that we get to reflect on Jordan and just what an awesome guy he was.
And documentaries like this are going to get to go so far in continuing his legacy and who he is, and that he gets to live on through those memories. I couldn't ask for a greater, more loving son than Jordan Robinson.
Jordan, we love you. You're a very patient person to live in our family and to be caught right in the middle there, okay? We love you, Jordan.
Life hasn't stopped since Jordan's death. In 2013, Josh and Cassidy had their first child, Micah Jordan, which made me an uncle for the first time.
Uncle Jordan?
His life hit me pretty hard, because the fact that he doesn't get to meet Uncle Jordan, I have to be somewhat of two uncles to him. I have to love him that much more. One way I do that is to give him MJ gear, which was always kind of a love language for me and Jordan. In 2015, Micah became a big brother to Hannah, who was one of the most stoked little chicks out there. Whether she's angry or joyful, she's all in. Jeff got married in 2014, and he now has a son named Noah Jordan. And you already know I got him rocking some Air Jordan onesies.
The reality is when my daughters ask why I named my daughter, my second born, Jordan Hope, I can tell them the story. about Jordan Paul Robinson, a guy we called Gord, and how he was special to Daddy.
Like, I'll talk to my wife, Laura, and say, hey, you know, you should be thankful for maybe how I treat you due to the fact of Jordan. Like, I want you to know that. And I look even farther now, having my own little girl, and like, that's gonna be the same message that I communicate to her. Like, hey, you're treated a certain way. I'm gonna raise you a certain way due to stuff I've learned from someone I respected.
And even though me and Coach were states apart, we always kept in contact. I got to hang with him back in May 2016, and we took this picture in his living room in front of Jordan's jersey. Little did I know it would be the last time I'd ever see him. On Monday morning, January 30th, 2017, I woke up to the news that he had had a heart attack in his sleep. 2 days later, I found myself in Palm Bay, Florida, writing a speech for his funeral. I mean, we were just texting a few days prior about Steph Curry. He was 45 years old, and he leaves behind 4 amazing daughters and an incredibly cool wife, Haley. She requested that we wear his favorite color to the funeral, Carolina blue.
I'm gonna try my best to speak of what I feel Coach was to me. It's almost like any words that I could write down just don't really speak the language of how I feel about Coach.
You two just have a connection. I'm not really sure I could define that. Certain people have that soul-to-soul connection. He loved you at first like a father loves sons, and then over time it deepened into a true and enduring friendship.
Coach was kind of like a beacon for a lot of people. There's a lot more ships than there are beacons. And Coach was a beacon. Now, as I've gotten older, somewhere inside me, I keep a list of people that are just on the special list. You just make the team of earning my deepest love, or, you know, you come in and save the day for me. And specifically with how my coach loved my brother Jordan before and through cancer. He's on the list, top of the list. And at my brother's funeral, Coach spoke, and he ended it simply with, "To know Jordan is one of the greatest honors of my life." And I echo those same words about Coach.
We done?
Yeah. All right.
You know, I know that we will never understand fully what's supposed to take place and why things happen, but, you know, it's like, I mean, I know I'm the interviewee, but you're the brother, like, how is that?
I have a lot of dreams about him, and he's always with me or where I'm going, like he's gonna meet me there, but I never see his face. There was a friend of mine who asked me, and he had been going through something that was painful, and was like, you know, how do you deal with the loss of your brother? And I think he was hoping for some process. And I was like, well, you just bleed out for the rest of your life, and there's nothing you can do about it. But that's not like a, oh my gosh, I'm trying to depress you. That's just a reality. When you love somebody that much, like, it's gonna be painful. And everything I touch is gonna have blood on it. Almost 18 years of my life, I had Jordan in mind. That's an incredible gift. So anything I bleed is totally worth it. You know, most people, when they say you should move on, means forgetting. I don't want to forget. Every memory I have of him is good, even the really terrible ones of watching him die. He was still Jordan. So the whole, like, time heals all wounds, I just don't think that's true for me, you know? People can say whatever they want. Like if you're locked arms with someone and I'm hopping on one leg, if he moves, I'm gonna fall down. So now that that person's not there, I'm just trying to figure out how to walk. And I'm gonna fall down, and I'm gonna get back up, I'm gonna fall down, and I'm gonna look for him to hold me up, but he's not there. And then I'm gonna remember all the times he held me up. And then however far I go, that's all I'm gonna think about. Because we were much better together than I am hopping on one foot trying to do life.
Let's hear it for Jordan Robinson.
I'm me, and that's all right. You're the only one who was alright with me. You're the brother I needed. You're the brother the world needed. You loved me for me. You're gone, and I'm not alright. Me without you is not not alright.